Have you ever witnessed a single warrior stride through the most advanced planetary defenses as though they were little more than paper walls? In this riveting story, a lone human soldier does exactly that, reducing once proud spires to rubble in a matter of days and forcing an entire alien race to confront an undeniable truth. Humans are more formidable than anyone dared imagine. But that's only the beginning of this interstellar tale of fear, awe, and unexpected alliance. Join us as we delve into diplomatic gambits that forge unbreakable bonds, military strategies that merge two civilizations' strengths, and a romance that transcends the boundaries of tradition. If you're eager to see how a looming war can transform into a lasting peace, and how sworn enemies can become each other's greatest allies, be sure to listen to the full story. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable adventures and share your thoughts with us. Ambassador Caliera Salandris stood at the colossal viewport of her diplomatic vessel, the Radiant Dawn, watching in mute horror as the planet below lay in smoldering ruin. What had once been the pristine capital city of Valhedra, with its symmetrical towers and latticework boulevards, now resembled a charred skeleton. The skyline was punctuated by flames and the broken silhouettes of warships, their advanced alloys twisted like paper. Every few seconds, the distant rumble of an exploding fuel depot or the muted flash of laser fire shattered the darkness, revealing the extent of the devastation. Beside Caliera, First Counselor Zeleron stood with shaking hands clasped behind his back. He wore flowing robes of deep emerald and gold, the formal attire of high-ranking Saldorian statesmen, robes that seemed terribly out of place amid the destruction they observed. When he finally spoke, his voice quivered. "We poured a century of research into our planetary shields," he said, his gaze never leaving the ravaged terrain. The Valhedra defense grid was said to be impenetrable, an accomplishment so significant we believed no force in the galaxy could breach it. Caliera tore her eyes from the surface, turning to look at him. Her golden irises glimmered with suppressed fear, set against the pale yellow hue of her sclera. "Clearly our assumptions were misguided," she replied, pressing a hand to the cool glass of the viewport. Beneath her slender fingers, the reflections danced, crimson flares from the burning capital, the ghostly flickers of crashed cruisers, and most unsettling of all, the small, solitary figure that moved confidently among the ruins. He was a human, encased in thick combat armor that bore fresh scorch marks. Even from orbit, there was something undeniably predatory about his stride. "Ambassador, if we do not act, we will lose more than a city." This was Second Counselor Alaris speaking up, his voice hesitant, but also tinged with desperate hope. A tall, angular Saldorian with pale blue skin and obsidian black eyes, Alaris had always championed pragmatic diplomacy. "We've spent decades building alliances and forging treaties, and in the span of 3 days, they've undone what took others decades or centuries to even attempt." Caliera nodded gravely. The weight of her diplomatic role pressed down upon her with crushing force. For years, the Saldorians had viewed the humans as another upstart race. Ambitious, yes, but no more special than many others. Her own presence on Valhedra was meant to finalize a carefully negotiated treaty that would contain human expansion. Instead, she found herself witnessing the fall of her people's proudest achievements at their hands. The stories of humanity's unpredictable and tenacious fighting style had circulated among the stars, tales that had once been dismissed as exaggerations or improbable rumors. Now Caliera saw the truth with her own eyes. A tremor ran through her body. She remembered the official assessments from the Saldorian Military Council. Humans were said to be adaptable in ways that defied logic. They improvised where other species relied on protocol. They evolved their tactics rapidly, often mid-battle, as though warfare was a living, breathing entity they could shape. Not once had anyone considered them gods of war. But seeing this lone soldier strolling through the chaos, surrounded by burning wreckage and shattered spires, the phrase now seemed alarmingly apt. Caliera thought back to the negotiation tables, countless discussions about resource division, warp lane access, and mutual defense pacts. The humans had always arrived with polite smiles, firm handshakes, and an undercurrent of intensity that many Seldorians found unnerving. They were so direct, so ready to bend or even break established rules if they felt it necessary. In the past, that trait had been dismissed as barbaric. But now, as dawn broke over the ravaged city, that same trait seemed terrifyingly effective. Her heart pounded in her chest. "We cannot win," she said softly, her voice tight with emotion. "Humans, they aren't just another species. They are something else. Their capacity for warfare transcends our understanding. If we don't find a way to appease them, to work with them, our civilization, our entire starfaring legacy, will vanish." The counselors turned to her in stunned silence. Even Zeleron looked unsettled. The lines of pride and dignity etched on his face now etched over with fear. Ilaris was the first to speak, his voice a trembling whisper. "Then we must propose terms. An alliance." He seemed almost afraid to utter the words aloud. But Cullera, with her diplomatic training, sensed that an alliance might be the only path to survival. And yet, she knew that a simple treaty would not suffice. A gesture more profound was required, something that would bind the humans' sense of honor and loyalty, something that they could not easily disregard. After a moment of inward deliberation, Cullera straightened her shoulders. "We will offer them more than words on paper," she said, her voice resolute. "I will bind myself to them. One of them, a leader or someone with authority. A union of two lives is often more enduring than any treaty. If humanity is as passionate as our intelligence suggests, then perhaps this marriage will compel them to spare us." The notion sounded outlandish, medieval almost, but in her gut, she believed it was the only gambit with a chance of success. At this bold statement, Zeleron's eyes went wide. "Ambassador, you can't be serious," he exclaimed. But Cullera met his alarm with unwavering resolve, gaze traveling back down to the scarred surface, where the lone human soldier had halted in mid-step, as though sensing her watchful eyes from above. She saw him glance skyward, toward her very position in orbit. The intensity of his posture made her skin prickle. "I am," she insisted. "I would rather become a bride to one of these so-called gods of war than watch my people be trampled into extinction." No one contradicted her this time. A stifling quiet settled in the vessel's bridge. Beyond the glass, the fires of Valhedra's once luminous skyline flickered on, a dreadful testament to what might be lost. And Cullera made her decision, a life-changing choice made in the face of unstoppable human might. The diplomatic summit arranged aboard the human vessel, the Star Striker, was a stark contrast to the subdued sorrow in the Seldorian ship. Polished white quarters hummed with quiet efficiency, holographic displays lining the walls to offer visitors glimpses of humanity's rich and often turbulent history. When Cullera arrived with her entourage of counselors and aides, she felt a knot of apprehension tighten in her abdomen. Humans had already demonstrated the horrific capabilities of their war fleets. Now she would see the other side of them, diplomatic perhaps, but no less formidable. She was led into a spacious conference chamber where sleek metal chairs surrounded a broad table of dark, polished material. Tiny floating orbs emitted a gentle, ambient light, giving the place an air of clinical calm. But as Cullera settled into her seat, the tension thrummed beneath her skin. She noticed the subtle details, the inconspicuous security turrets tucked into the ceiling corners, the hardened plating behind what otherwise appeared to be delicate, decorative wall panels. This wasn't just a meeting hall, it was a fortress. The door hissed open, and Commander Rowan Pierce entered with a measured gait that immediately drew Cullera's attention. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing combat attire that had clearly seen action. Patches of soot clung to the segmented plates of his chest armor, and the faint smell of ozone lingered on him like a faint cologne of war. His face bore a few small scars, one along the jawline, another near the temple, as though carved by glancing energy bolts. His eyes, however, were sharp and disconcertingly focused. This was no pencil-pushing official, but a frontline soldier, the very man who had been leading the ground assault that ravaged Valhedra. "I understand you have a proposal for us, Ambassador," Pierce began. His voice held the calm confidence of someone who'd won more battles than he cared to recall. He took his seat at the table without ceremony, glancing at Cullera's counselors almost as an afterthought. Initially, we expected your leaders to send someone from your highest military command, a dignitary in ceremonial garb, perhaps. But I see that your mission is more specific. Kalira exchanged a quick glance with Alaris before responding. Commander Pierce, we Seldorians acknowledge that we severely underestimated the capabilities of humanity. She injected as much poise as she could into her tone. We believed our technology, alliances, and strategic positioning would deter you. Instead, you tore through our defenses in 3 days, a feat that defied every analysis we had. Pierce nodded slowly, lips forming a faint, inscrutable smile. We adapt, he stated simply, as though that one word explained the totality of human superiority. In the heavy silence that followed, Kaliera steadied her breathing. She could practically feel the watchful eyes of Zeleron and Alaris behind her, but the plan had been her idea. Now it fell to her to shape the outcome. We offer an alliance, she said at last, not a mere ceasefire, but a permanent bond, a merging of our people's futures. To cement that bond, I will marry one of your leaders. Pierce's gaze flickered. Amusement seemed to spark in his expression as he leaned forward, folding his hands atop the table. Marry, he repeated, as though tasting the word. That's quite a proposition. Typically, we'd expect a formal delegation, some heads of state, or at least an admiral with a ceremonial vow. But you have something else in mind? Caliera's pulse hammered. She had read about human social rituals, how they valued personal bonds on a level that could transcend treaties. To us, marriage is a profound joining, as she explained. We hoped, that it might appeal to your species' sense of loyalty and honor. If there is a sacred bond formed, our people may be spared further annihilation. Pierce let out a quiet chuckle that wasn't entirely unkind. An interesting strategy, but you're coming at this from an angle that might not fit how we really operate. He paused, letting the anticipation build before continuing. The brass back at the fleet would probably have me send a top-ranking admiral for this, but that's not how we do things. We like to break assumptions, Ambassador. His gaze was unwavering. The first assumption we'll break is who you'll be marrying. Despite her resolve, Caliera felt a jolt of apprehension. Who, if not an admiral or a high-ranking political figure? Pierce set his elbows on the table. Me, he said so casually it made her breath catch. I led the incursion on Valhedra. I'm the one who walked through your burning city. And from what I hear, you were watching me the entire time. Caliera's cheeks flushed with a deeper shade of green, the Saldorian equivalent of a furious blush. She hadn't expected her careful observation to be noticed, let alone called out in such a direct manner. I thought you would send a politician or a statesperson, she managed, trying to retain her composure. Political leaders don't always grasp the realities of war, Pierce replied. But you do, evidently, or you're beginning to. He glanced down at her hands, noticing the faint tremor she tried to still. And if you think forming a life bond is the surest way to unite our species, then the man who saw firsthand how your defenses crumbled might be the best candidate to ensure you truly comprehend what humanity is capable of. Shall we say, on every level. Kalera's heart pounded so loudly she thought everyone in the chamber could hear. This was not how she had expected the negotiations to unfold. She knew humans were direct, but to have the frontline commander himself volunteer for something so personal left her reeling. Yet, she felt an odd sense of relief. At least she would not have to start this precarious relationship with someone who only knew war from secondhand reports. If nothing else, Pierce possessed a warrior's honesty. Glancing back at Zeleron, and Alaris, she received nothing but wide-eyed shock. Perhaps they recognized, as she did, that they no longer had the luxury to bargain. Then it's decided, Caliera finally said, inhaling deeply. Her words sounded shaky but resolute. A marriage between the Saldorian diplomat and the human commander. If it is acceptable to your people, then we will proceed. It's acceptable to me, Pierce replied, locking eyes with her. As for my people, they'll accept whatever ensures the future and victory of humanity. Be warned, though, Ambassador Caliera, you're stepping into a bond that goes far beyond politics. We humans have an aptitude for intensity. She didn't doubt it, not for an instant. No Sildorian ceremony had ever combined the pomp of interstellar diplomacy with the raw undercurrent of a forging alliance quite like this. Caliera found herself standing on a raised dais within a repurposed hangar bay aboard the Star Striker, surrounded by an odd mix of Saldorian and human observers. Overhead, starship support beams were hung with makeshift silken banners, some embroidered with Saldorian motifs, others bearing the emblem of the United Terran Fleet. The flickering glow of overhead lights cast a surreal shimmer on the improvised decor. Commander Pierce stood at her side, still wearing a portion of his combat armor, much to the confusion of some Saldorian officials who expected more traditional finery. Yet there was a certain symbolism in his attire. It bore the scars of the conflict that had brought them to this point. Caliera, meanwhile, wore a refined gown of shimmering teal and silver, Saldorian in style but adapted for the shape of her slender figure, an outward representation of her heritage and her willingness to stand at the threshold of a new reality. A hush fell over the gathering. A Terran officiant, dressed in the crisp uniform of a starship chaplain, spoke words that merged the rights of both species, an improvised tradition for an unprecedented event. We stand here in witness to the unity of Commander Rowan Pierce of Earth and Ambassador Caliera Salandris of Saldoria, he began, voice echoing through the hangar's acoustic space. In joining their lives, they also join our peoples, forging a bond that extends beyond a mere treaty. Let all here understand the gravity of this union. It represents a hope that we may set aside ancient boundaries and, together, carve a path to a shared future. A wave of quiet rippled among the onlookers. Caliera could feel the weight of countless gazes. Her heart hammered, but she willed herself to remain poised. As the officiant continued, she glimpsed the expressions of her Saldorian peers. Some watched in unmitigated skepticism, while others seemed cautiously hopeful. And then there were the human officers, clad in uniforms or lightweight armor, eyes filled with curiosity and a certain respect. She realized that many of them were also uncertain, bridging the chasm between species and cultures for the first time. At a subtle cue, Pierce turned to her, his gaze intense. He took her hand in his, palm against palm. Despite the differences in their physiology, her greenish complexion, his rougher skin, there was a warmth that passed between them. Caliera, he said softly, yet it resonated through her. I've known war more intimately than peace. When I stand here with you, I feel like I'm stepping onto an unknown battlefield. But if there's one thing we humans excel at, it's facing the unknown head-on. She swallowed the lump in her throat. Commander Pierce, she responded, her own voice carrying the melodic lilt of Sildorian speech. I once believed that humanity was reckless, even barbaric. In the ruins of Valhedra, I saw how devastating your will to fight can be. But I also saw something else, a spark of compassion, a refusal to destroy when other options might be found. I pledge my life not simply to you, but to the possibility that our species can be more together than apart. The chaplain nodded, sealing their vows with a solemn intonation. A hush deeper than before fell over the audience. Then at the final line, you may show your union in any manner your customs permit. Commander Pierce tilted Caliera's face upward and kissed her gently. The assembled crowd erupted in applause, mingled with astonished murmurs. For a heartbeat, Caliera's chest felt tight, not from fear, but from the whirlwind of emotion, relief, uncertainty, respect, and an inexplicable thrill. Zelleron and Alaris stood nearby, their expressions conflicted. Though uneasy, they dipped their heads in acknowledgement of the union they had once found unthinkable. The humans, meanwhile, welcomed Caliera as though she were one of their own, albeit with no shortage of curious stares. She realized this was a single step in a long journey, but it was a pivotal one. The war had not ended, far from it. Yet a door had opened that might save Saldoria from utter devastation. After the ceremony, as onlookers dispersed to either whisper in corners or return to duties, Caliera and Pierce found themselves in a small corridor leading away from the main hangar. The hum of ship engines pulsed beneath their feet. Well, Bessie, Pierce said, arching a brow, that went better than I expected. Caliera allowed herself a faint smile. I felt like an exhibit in a zoo for a moment, she admitted. But it was a necessary performance. Now comes the real challenge. convincing both our peoples that this marriage is more than symbolic. His smile turned wry. Trust me, Ambassador, I don't do anything merely for show. He paused, letting his gaze travel over her. You'll find that humans can be very earnest in their commitments, but I suppose we should plan how to show your counselors and my superiors that this alliance works, in and out of a formal setting. Agreed, Caliera answered, her stomach twisting with equal parts anxiety and anticipation. She wondered what it truly meant to be bound to a human, a man of war whose eyes shone with a fierce determination she'd never seen in her own kind. Whatever lay ahead, there was no turning back. Their fates were now intertwined. Days after the wedding, Caliera found herself in a setting she never imagined, a human combat training facility on board the Star Striker. The vast space was subdivided into specialized arenas, from zero-gravity chambers to holographic projection fields. At that moment, she and Commander Pierce were in a large, padded sparring room. High overhead, the vantage windows allowed spectators, mostly human Marines or Seldorian observers, to watch the training sessions in progress. Pierce insisted she learn at least the fundamentals of human close-quarters combat. Initially, Caliera balked. She was a diplomat, not a soldier. Her entire career revolved around negotiations, not violence. But a single conversation with Pierce had changed her mind. If you want to understand us, he had told her, you need to experience how we fight. Our approach to conflict informs everything, from how we handle negotiations to how we handle personal relationships. So here she was, wearing form-fitting protective gear, face flush with exertion. Pierce circled her with a predatory grace, hands relaxed at his sides, but she knew better than to underestimate him. She recalled the rumors of human adaptability, how they could switch tactics mid-fight faster than any known species. It was not mere rumor anymore. She'd seen it in the fall of Alhedra. He lunged, testing her reflexes. She twisted aside, attempting to execute a throw he had taught her. But Pierce countered, pivoting on his heel and locking her arm in a quick, controlled grasp. With a gentle but firm push, he sent her off balance. Caliera landed on the mat with a breathy thud, heart pounding. Remember your stance, he instructed, letting her go and stepping back. Keep your center of gravity low and anticipate your opponent's movement. There was no gloating in his voice, just a calm directive. She appreciated that he didn't treat her with condescension. This was a genuine lesson, not a demonstration of superiority. Caliera rose, taking a slow breath. She set her feet carefully, recalling the theoretical points. Seldorian physiology granted her a certain flexibility. Humans, on the other hand, possessed a sturdiness that enabled them to absorb impact. If she leveraged her agility and quick reactions, perhaps she could outmaneuver him. She tried again. This time, when Pierce advanced, she feinted left, then spun right, hooking her leg behind his knee. Her momentum swept his feet out from under him, and he landed with a surprised grunt. A ripple of disbelief spread among the onlookers. Pierce offered an approving grin. Now that's what I'm talking about, he said, swiftly rolling to his feet with feline elegance. You see, you adapted mid-sequence. Good. Caliera was panting, but a flutter of pride warmed her chest. I learned from the best, she managed, still catching her breath. You're picking it up faster than any Seldorian I've met, Pierce said as he gestured for her to take a water break. But that's not the only reason we're doing this. She took a grateful gulp from the canteen. What else then? Confidence, he replied, his gaze serious. When you negotiated with us, your people were in a position of desperation. Learning our combat style will give you insight into how we think. But it'll also show that you're not afraid to stand alongside us, even in a fight. That kind of determination is something humans respect on a fundamental level. Caliera nodded, reflecting on how fear had once dominated her view of humans. Standing in this training facility, her new husband opposite her, humans and Seldorians alike watching, felt surreal. But with every move, every parry, she felt a small piece of that fear dissolve. In its place, a cautious admiration grew. After another bout of sparring, they took a moment's rest. Pierce handed her a towel, his dark eyes steady on hers. I believe in directness, Caliera, he said quietly. You've tied yourself to a species you barely understand, and I suspect the political ramifications will be immense. But if we're going to make this alliance work, it has to go beyond treaties and ceremonies. Let's start by learning each other's strengths in the most visceral way possible. She dabbed the sweat from her brow, acknowledging his words. I never expected marriage to involve hand-to-hand combat, she joked, voice tinged with nervous laughter. Yet for the first time, I'm beginning to see a hint of why humanity can be so formidable. You fight with your whole being, your mind, your body, your spirit. It's as if you refuse to accept any boundary as final. He rested a firm hand on her shoulder. Exactly. We push limits. We find new ways to fight, new ways to survive, new ways to win. That's why we'll never fit neatly into anyone's expectations. And it's why we can become unstoppable when we pour everything into a cause. Caliera's chest tightened. Memories of Valhadra's ruins flashed before her mind's eye. In those hollowed-out spires, she had witnessed the horrifying apex of human determination. But here, in the training ring, she also glimpsed a different side, the potential for growth, for forging new paths. I believe, she said slowly, that such tenacity might save us all, or condemn us. I hope, with our alliance, it will be the former. Pierce's lips curved into a smile. That's the plan, Ambassador. Caliera's next challenge came in the form of a human tradition known as the combat trials, an ordeal that shocked her Seldorian sensibilities. It was not a formal requirement, but Pierce's unit, an elite battalion called the Crimson Lancers, insisted that the commander's spouse, even if alien, undergo a series of tests to demonstrate grit and allegiance. To be fully accepted into their ranks, she would have to show them she could hold her own, not just as a figurehead, but as a partner in arms. The training bay was reconfigured for the occasion. Multiple obstacles lined the expansive floor, weighted poles, rotating strike dummies, even a set of real-time holographic adversaries that could be dialed up to varying difficulty levels. The Crimson Lancers, humans of varying heights, skin tones, and sexes, stood in a semicircle, observing Caliera with reserved interest. Some wore friendly, encouraging smiles. Others regarded her with folded arms, their eyes flicking skeptically over her slender build. Pierce stood to the side, arms crossed, but Caliera sensed his unspoken support. When the trials coordinator, Sergeant Halverson, a tall woman with short-cropped hair, stepped forward to outline the tests, Caliera couldn't help but swallow hard. You'll face 3 stages: strategy, combat proficiency, and an oath of spirit, Halverson explained, her voice echoing through the hush. Success in each indicates a deeper understanding of our ways. Fail any, and we cannot, in good conscience, consider you one of our own. Caliera's heartbeat throbbed in her ears. She remembered how her entire diplomatic upbringing had emphasized restraint, poise, and rational discourse. Here, she faced a group that valued action as the purest language of trust and respect. Steeling her nerves, she nodded. I'm ready. The first stage was strategy. Caliera was ushered to a holographic console where she had to direct a simulated squad of lancers against a technologically advanced foe. The constraints were punishing. The enemy boasted superior numbers and firepower, and the map's terrain was riddled with choke points. Drawing on the hours she'd spent learning from Pierce and analyzing human battle logs, Caliera deployed her simulated forces in unorthodox maneuvers. She ordered small squads to feint retreats, luring the enemy into poorly defensible positions. She combined mobility with targeted strikes, mimicking the hit hard and move style that humans use so effectively. In the end, she secured a victory in the simulation. The onlooking Lancers exchanged impressed whispers. Strategy, it appeared, could be learned, and she had outmaneuvered a foe that would have annihilated her if she'd used traditional Seldorian tactics. Even Sergeant Halverson offered a curt nod of approval. Stage 1 passed, she announced, tapping a code into her data slate. Next up, combat proficiency. Caliera's pulse raced as she stepped onto the designated floor. On all sides, the Crimson Lancers closed in, forming a ring. 5 volunteers emerged, some armed with staff-like practice weapons, others with advanced shock blades dialed to a non-lethal setting. Before the trial commenced, Pierce caught her gaze and gave a subtle nod. She exhaled, recalling the hours of sparring they'd shared. Her greenish skin glistened with perspiration, and she tensed in anticipation. The trial began. She faced her first opponent, a brute of a man nearly twice her width. He lunged, and she sidestepped, using her agility to evade direct confrontation. When he overcommitted, she employed a pivot throw that Pierce had taught her. The heavy man stumbled, recovered quickly, and swung his staff low. Caliera barely managed to block with a borrowed rod, the impact jarring her arms. She retaliated with a swift kick, connecting with his shin. It wasn't strong enough to topple him, but it made him step back. By the time the second and third opponents joined the fray, Caliera found herself in the center of a coordinated assault. She ducked under a slash, spun away from a downward strike, and improvised a counter to disarm one fighter. Sharp pain flared along her ribs when another struck a glancing blow, but adrenaline pulsed through her veins, fueling her determination. She could almost hear Pierce's voice. Adapt. Keep adapting. Despite the bruises accumulating on her limbs, Caliera managed to hold her ground. She landed a well-timed blow that took an opponent by surprise, sending him staggering. In a final desperate move, she dodged a combined attack from two directions, diving forward rather than retreating. It worked. Her aggressors collided with each other, disarmed, while she regained her footing. When Sergeant Halverson called an end to the trial, Caliera stood breathing heavily, battered but not broken. Her eyes scanned the ring of lancers. Some wore respectful grins, others looked astonished. Pierce offered her a small salute from the sidelines, pride evident on his face. The final trial was something the Crimson Lancers simply called the Oath of Spirit. Caliera was led to a quiet, dimly lit chamber filled with tall, narrow pillars of polished metal. Flickering lights, tiny votive lamps, adorned each pillar, casting shifting shadows across the walls. Unlike the previous tests, this was no simulation or combat drill. Instead, Halverson explained, it was a moment of communion, a chance to articulate, in front of the entire unit, why she fought, what she believed in, and who she was choosing to stand beside. The Lancers assembled in a loose half-circle, their expressions solemn. Pierce stood at the far right, observing silently but with an intensity that made Caliera's spine tingle. This, she realized, was perhaps the most crucial test. Humans, especially these elite soldiers, valued loyalty forged in blood and conviction. If she failed to show genuine resolve, no feat of strategy or combat skill would earn their acceptance. Stepping into the center of the chamber, she cleared her throat, feeling uncomfortably aware of the hush. "I know you call me ambassador," she began, voice trembling slightly, "and that most of you see me as an outsider. You're not entirely wrong. I come from a people who spent centuries perfecting politeness, stability, and alliances built on carefully constructed etiquette. We saw you humans as dangerous, unpredictable, perhaps unstoppable." Her gaze lingered on the faint bruises forming along her arms. "But then after all the fear, I encountered something else, your spirit. It's not just about destroying what stands in your way. It's about pouring your entire soul into defending what you hold dear. I've witnessed the power of human adaptability, your readiness to challenge the unknown. You call it aggression or tenacity. I call it unstoppable hope, because you always believe there's a way to win, a way to survive, a way to keep going." She paused, trying to read the faces before her. Some Lancers remained stoic, while others revealed glimmers of curiosity or approval. "I stand here," she continued, "because I believe that the union between my people and yours can be more than a desperate measure. It can be a transformation. Humans fight with heart and soul. We Saldorians can guide, strategize, bring nuance. Together we can become something the galaxy has never seen. A force that doesn't just conquer, but protects." A hush followed her words, a long, almost painful silence. Halverson finally spoke, her voice subdued but tinged with respect. "Well said, but words alone don't earn our trust. Are you willing to bind yourself to this cause, to shed blood with us, if necessary?" Caliera nodded. "I am." With trembling resolve, she took a small blade offered by one of the Lancers and drew it across her palm. A thin line of greenish blood welled up, dripping onto the chamber's metallic floor. "My blood for yours," she said quietly, echoing the phrase Halverson had prompted. "My life for yours. Let this stand as my oath." In the flickering lamplight, the droplets of Saldorian blood shone like emeralds. A ripple of approval went through the crowd. Pierce stepped forward, crossing the circle of onlookers to reach her. Without hesitation, he took the blade and mirrored her action, pressing the cut on his own palm to hers. Human blood mixed with Saldorian, a visceral symbol of their unity. A wave of cheers and applause erupted. Caliera sagged in relief, nearly collapsing from the emotional strain as Pierce caught her. "You did it," he whispered against her ear, voice rough with pride. "You've earned their respect." She closed her eyes, taking in the tumultuous feeling of belonging that washed over her. Hours ago, she was a diplomat alone among formidable strangers. Now, though battered and bloodied, she was one of them, or as close as any Saldorian might ever be. And as she gazed up at Pierce's triumphant grin, she realized that this trial had bridged more than cultural divides. It had brought her closer to him, in a way she had never expected. The victory celebration was equal parts rowdy camaraderie and solemn reflection. The Crimson Lancers had transformed a section of the Star Strikers' recreation deck into an impromptu gathering hall, complete with barrels of human-crafted beverages. Some mild, others potent enough to make Caliera's head spin after a single taste. Boisterous laughter mixed with the clink of metal cups, while occasionally an officer would stand to give a short speech congratulating Caliera and reaffirming the bond between their species. Caliera found herself seated in a corner booth alongside Pierce, Sergeant Halverson, and a few other Lancers she now knew by name. A swirling mixture of relief, pride, and exhaustion left her more subdued than usual, though she responded graciously to every toast raised in her honor. From time to time, Pierce would rest his hand lightly on her lower back, a gesture both possessive and reassuring. She began to understand that in the human warrior culture, physical touch had layers of meaning, a sign of protection, of solidarity, and perhaps of a deeper connection that words couldn't fully express. Halverson lifted her cup in another toast. "To Ambassador Caliera," she declared, voice ringing with genuine respect, "for showing us that tenacity comes in all forms, and that forging an alliance can be as big a leap as any battlefield maneuver." A chorus of agreements followed. Caliera bowed her head, a soft flush coloring her cheeks. "Thank you, Sergeant," she replied, raising her own cup, "for welcoming me among you and for teaching me how you humans truly live." Pierce chuckled, leaning in to speak quietly near her ear. "We haven't shown you everything yet," he teased, the mischievous glint in his eyes sparking a flutter in her stomach. Then more seriously he added, "But this is a good start. You've been baptized into our way of life now." She sipped the sweet, slightly bitter beverage in her cup, letting the flavors swirl on her tongue. A part of her still felt uneasy. War loomed like a dark horizon. Their alliance might mean survival, or it might drag Saldoria into conflicts it was ill-prepared for. Yet, as she watched the Lancers laugh and recount stories of impossible victories, she recognized something in their spirit that she had never truly felt before. It was a raw, unfiltered belief that they could overcome any obstacle if they stood together. Eventually, the crowd began to disperse, and Caliera excused herself to catch a moment of quiet. She stepped out onto a narrow observation deck, pressing a hand to the curved window that revealed the star-studded void of space. Beside her, Pierce appeared silently, the reflective sheen of the glass casting ghostly light over his features. She exhaled, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. "I never imagined my life would take this course," she admitted, voice low. "Married to a human commander, accepted into an elite war unit. Sometimes I wonder if it's really me or if I'm just playing a part." Pierce wrapped an arm around her waist, drawing her against him. "This isn't just a performance, Caliera. You bled for us, fought alongside us, and you stood up in front of people you barely knew to declare your loyalty. That's real. It's not an act you can fake." She rested her head against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him through the rough fabric of his uniform. In that moment, the swirl of doubt subsided a little. The sincerity in his voice was disarming. "Rowan," she began, testing his given name on her tongue for the first time, "I want to believe we can truly unite our species, but there's so much that we have yet to learn about each other. So many prejudices to dismantle, so many new frontiers to face." He placed a gentle kiss on her temple, an affectionate gesture she'd come to associate with comfort and acceptance. We'll take it one step at a time. I've fought in too many battles to expect easy resolutions. But we humans have a saying, one victory at a time, and you just earned your first. Caliera blinked away the sting of tears. She gazed out at the endless night sprinkled with starlight, feeling both incredibly small and suddenly infinite. In the silent glimmer of the cosmos, she found a strange solace. This was the beginning of a story whose ending was unknown, but for the first time, the fear in her heart was tempered by something else: hope. The weeks following Caliera's acceptance into the Crimson Lancers ushered in an era of cautious optimism for both Saldorians and humans. Though scattered skirmishes still flared on distant colony worlds, on the Star Striker, an unprecedented joint training initiative took root. Under Commander Rowan Pierce's guidance, the humans and a select group of Saldorian military specialists convened to exchange tactical knowledge and refine each other's strengths. Caliera, freshly recognized as both diplomat and honorary Lancer, found herself at the heart of these efforts. At first, the Saldorians approached the joint drills with uncertainty. Their preferred warfare methods centered on meticulous coordination, symphonies of precision and order that reflected centuries of diplomatic tradition. By contrast, human soldiers showcased a fluid, adaptive style bordering on chaos to a Saldorian eye. After all, these were the so-called gods of war who had torn down Valhadra's defenses in mere days. Yet Caliera noticed how, once the initial awkwardness faded, the differences became opportunities. Saldorians marveled at humanity's ability to pivot strategies mid-fight, to improvise in ways that sometimes defied logic but nonetheless worked. Meanwhile, humans discovered that the Saldorian emphasis on time cooperation and advanced sensor tech could bolster their aggressive maneuvers with an extra layer of finesse. Commander Pierce oversaw the program personally. He paired Saldorian officers with battle-tested human squad leaders, ensuring that each learned from the other's experiences. Caliera served as a mediator, translating not just the language but the mindset behind each culture's approach to conflict. Many nights, she sat beside Rowan in a cramped briefing room, analyzing data from the day's exercises. Together, they pored over hollow recordings of sparring sessions and squad maneuvers, pausing frames to highlight mistakes and breakthroughs. Though exhausted by the workload, Caliera was buoyed by what she saw. The initial chasm of distrust, especially among older Saldorian officers, began to close. Soldiers who once feared the humans as ruthless conquerors learned that behind every furious charge was a protective instinct fueled by loyalty and camaraderie. In turn, the humans discovered the Saldorians' methodical tradition was not mere stodgy formality, but a sophisticated tapestry of tactics that could enhance human adaptability. Yet, in quieter moments, Caliera sensed an undercurrent of tension. Zelleron, her one-time mentor and now colleague aboard the Star Striker, sometimes wore a guarded expression when watching the humans practice. The easy confidence and battlefield swagger of the Crimson Lancers troubled him more than he admitted. He would pull Caliera aside, gently reminding her that alliances between species had fractured before, often when passion overshadowed protocol. Caliera understood his caution. After all, the entire impetus for this alliance had been to spare Soldoria from destruction. It was born under the duress of war, and war alliances could shift as quickly as star currents in the cosmic void. Complicating matters were the rumors of other starfaring civilizations drawn by the cataclysm on Valhedra. The Saldorians had tried to downplay the planet's downfall, but word traveled fast among interstellar communities. Whispers circulated that the Cathun or the Kolari might dispatch their own envoys to observe the new human Saldorian arrangement. Even Alaris, that ever-practical second counselor, expressed concern. Was their fragile alliance about to be scrutinized, or perhaps contested, by those who saw in humanity's rise an existential threat? Despite these worries, the training pressed on, forging new bonds daily. In the close-quarters combat ring, a Saldorian officer named Arashai discovered a technique to pivot out of a human grappling hold by using the flexible angles of her shoulders, earning a whoop of praise from the Lancers. In a target range drill, a Saldorian sniper demonstrated advanced targeting software that nearly doubled the Crimson Lancer's accuracy. Over late-night strategy sessions, Caliera observed the birth of something both species had never possessed individually, a hybrid style of warfare, equal parts unpredictable adaptation and graceful orchestration. It was early yet, but she couldn't help seeing it as a portent of how much more they could achieve together if they could only survive what lay ahead. The breakthrough occurred, ironically, during an unfortunate accident. On a day that began much like any other, the training deck buzzed with activity. Pierce and Caliera supervised a demonstration of specialized infiltration tactics. The newly formed squads would show how Saldorian stealth suits, which rendered their wearers nearly invisible in low-light environments, could integrate with the Crimson Lancers' more direct infiltration methods. Holographic walls and rotating projectors lined the deck, simulating urban ruins laced with sensors and guard drones. Lieutenant Rena Maddox, a human infiltration expert, led a small squad of both Lancer Marines and Soldorian scouts through the mock environment. Overhead, a group of observers watched from a catwalk, including Zeleron and Alaris. At first, the routine unfolded smoothly. Each soldier moved with cautious grace, scanning corners and employing their respective strengths. The Saldorians melted into shadows with uncanny ease, while the humans advanced quickly, dispatching projected threats as they materialized. Yet, as they converged on the simulation's final checkpoint, something misfired. A glitch in the holographic environment caused overlapping illusions to erupt all around them, fragmented walls flickering in and out of existence. Suddenly, Lieutenant Maddox found herself face to face with an unexpected hologram of a hostile alien that lunged her way. Reacting on pure instinct, she pivoted and fired a short-range shock pistol. Unbeknownst to her, a Saldorian scout named Shassir had crept into that exact spot, cloaked by an active stealth suit. Pierce swore as the telltale crackle of electric discharge cut through the air. The simulation winked off in a bright flash, leaving the deck reeling with sudden emptiness. Caliera's heart lurched at the realization. The Saldorian scout had just been struck by a weapon meant to incapacitate an enemy. For a few breathless seconds, confusion reigned. Then the lights stabilized and they all rushed forward to find Shassir sprawled on the floor, her stealth suit shorting out in a shower of sparks, unconscious but still breathing. Medics scrambled onto the deck, pushing aside the swirling haze of malfunctioning holograms. Lieutenant Maddox knelt by Shassir's side, looking horrified, while the rest of the squad hovered in anxious circles. Pierce arrived moments later, barking commands to cut power to the entire simulation. Caliera hurried over to check on Shassir, her heart hammering. While Saldorians were more resilient than they appeared, especially in terms of neurological shocks, one careless misfire could still prove disastrous. A tense hour followed in the infirmary. Caliera and Pierce hovered at the edge of the treatment area, while a human medic worked in tandem with a Saldorian nurse to stabilize Shassir's vital signs. Outside, Zeleron's voice rose in agitation, condemning what he deemed an avoidable recklessness in the training exercises. Alaris, more level-headed, tried to placate both sides, reminding everyone that accidents in joint operations were inevitable, especially while forging new techniques. Shassir finally regained consciousness, disoriented but alive. The relief that washed over the onlookers was palpable. Yet strangely, it was the scout herself who first spoke about the unexpected outcome. When Caliera asked how she felt, Shassir, still weak, managed a faint smile. "That was intense," she murmured. "But I figured out something important just before the glitch." She went on to describe how, working alongside Lieutenant Maddox, they had devised a combined infiltration and strike maneuver only moments prior to the accident, something neither Saldorians nor humans could have executed alone. Shassir's revelation, though overshadowed by the mishap, confirmed the training had struck upon a potentially revolutionary tactic. The synergy forged at that fraught moment was precisely the kind of hybrid combat method they had begun to dream of. Word of the joint training program, and its promise of revolutionary tactics, spread beyond the Star Striker. Before long, delegations from several starfaring civilizations petitioned to observe, or even participate. Chief among them were the Cathun, a reptilian race with a reputation for ruthless efficiency, and the Tralaxi, an avian-like species famed for their intricate aerial maneuvers. Even the previously distant Ostari expressed tentative interest. None had official alliances with humanity or Soldoria, but curiosity, and perhaps fear drove them to investigate how these upstarts had managed to topple Valhedra's vaunted defenses in days and then unite their militaries under one banner. Caliera, feeling the weight of her diplomatic title, found herself swamped with formal requests in layered subtext. Many of the visiting delegations claimed purely academic interest, wanting to see how Saldorian protocol and human aggression could coexist. But she sensed deeper motivations. To outsiders, the merging of human and Saldorian martial strengths represented a tectonic shift in the balance of power. If this alliance worked, it might spark similar collaborations elsewhere, or provoke preemptive hostility from those who viewed a stronger humanity as a threat. The Star Striker was soon bustling with diplomats sporting varied insignias, each accompanied by security escorts that eyed each other warily in the corridors. Zelleron approached Caliera with a concerned expression one afternoon as they passed a group of Cathun observers hissing softly to one another. "Ambassador," he said in a low voice, "we must tread carefully. Some of these species may be here to glean our secrets, not to learn in good faith." Caliera couldn't help but agree. The Cathun, in particular, unnerved her. Their elongated forms and hypnotic stare were unsettling enough, but rumor held they respected only strength, dismissing those who showed any vulnerability. The Tralaxi, on the other hand, seemed more genuinely curious, dazzled by the new infiltration tactics they had heard about. Meanwhile, the Ostari remained polite yet aloof, as though weighing alliances behind carefully neutral smiles. Commander Pierce and Sergeant Halverson instituted tighter security protocols on the Star Striker, restricting the delegation's access to key areas. The newly minted training program continued, but now a portion of it was cordoned off from prying eyes. If the Crimson Lancers and the Saldorians truly were developing game-changing hybrid methods, they couldn't allow them to fall into potentially hostile hands. At the same time, Caliera worked tirelessly to project an air of openness and goodwill, hoping to reassure the galaxy that they were not forging an aggressive empire, but a protective alliance. Tension simmered as these outside observers watched humans and Saldorians training side by side, exchanging ideas and calibrating new weaponry. Caliera spent endless hours briefing the newcomers, carefully tailoring tours so that each delegation saw enough to satisfy curiosity without gleaning the alliance's most guarded tactics. It was a delicate balance. One misstep could lead to accusations of secrecy or overt militarization. Behind closed doors, Alaris outlined the threat scenario. If the Cathun deemed the human-Saldorian union too dangerous, they might strike preemptively, uniting other worried species in a coalition. "We stand at a precipice," Alaris warned. "We could either inspire the galaxy to join us in peaceful cooperation or provoke it into an arms race we cannot hope to contain." Caliera felt those words acutely. She already carried the responsibility of bridging the gap between two species who months ago had been at each other's throats. Now, the galaxy itself seemed to watch with bated breath. As she wandered the corridors, past humans relaxed in camaraderie with Saldorians, past sealed-off labs where new infiltration technology was tested, she understood that the stakes had soared far beyond the survival of one city or planet. A cosmic shift was in motion, and the pivot point, improbably, lay in the hands of a diplomat who'd once believed her life's mission was no greater than maintaining polite treaties among star nations. The facade of cautious diplomacy fractured one evening, when alarms shrieked through the Star Striker's corridors. Caliera had just concluded a tense meeting with a Cathun ambassador and was exiting the briefing room when the red emergency lights began to pulse. Pierce's voice echoed over the comm system. "All hands, code orange, unauthorized fighter launches detected near Docking Bay 5. This is not a drill." Fear jolted Caliera's senses. Gripping the handle of the door, she glanced up and down the corridor, where Saldorian aides and human marines scrambled in unison. Through the overhead announcements, she caught fragments of frantic comm chatter, mention of a Cathun corvette, references to weapon turrets powering up, and calls for immediate containment. She sprinted to the nearest security checkpoint. Along the way, Zelleron appeared at her side, panting, "The Cathun must have launched covert fighters to test our defenses or sabotage us. This can't be a coincidence." When she reached the command center, a wide circular chamber dominated by a hollow table in its center, she found Pierce issuing rapid-fire orders to the officers around him. A live tactical display showed two small Cathune crafts weaving through the Star Striker's perimeter. The starship's automated turrets hesitated to fire on them, presumably due to diplomatic protocols that forbade engaging allied or visiting vessels unless explicitly threatened. "They're scanning our hull," Pierce barked, eyes narrowed at the readouts. "Possible infiltration attempt or sensor sweep. We can't let them leave with whatever intel they have gathered." He paused, glancing at Caliera and Zelleron as they rushed in. "Ambassador Counselor, your visitors just violated every tenet of diplomatic conduct. I need a go-ahead to respond with force if they refuse to stand down." Caliera steadied herself, mind reeling. If they fired on the Cathune fighters unprovoked, they risked sparking an interstellar incident. But letting those crafts depart with sensitive data could be equally catastrophic, especially if they discovered partial details of the new hybrid tactics. "Send a final warning," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. "Make it clear that further evasion or aggression will be met with force." The comm officer relayed the ultimatum. For a moment, the two rogue crafts seemed to hesitate, as if listening. Then, almost in unison, they peeled away, igniting thrusters that pointed them toward a hyperlane exit. Pierce didn't wait. "Gunners, open fire. Disable if possible. Destroy if necessary." A volley of beam pulses and railgun slugs streaked through space. The first Cathune fighter attempted to teach and was clipped by a railgun round, spinning out before erupting in a muted explosion. The second craft, more agile, evaded the main barrage and sped toward the hyperlane. Pierce cursed under his breath. "We can't let them jump." He signaled the pursuit squad. Half a dozen Lancer pilots scrambled to their interceptors. But the enemy was fast, and their ship's silhouette flickered ominously on the display. Then, in a stroke of either desperation or cunning, the craft spun back toward the Star Striker and released a barrage of micro-torpedoes. Alarms blared anew as the station's point defense system sprang into action, trying to shoot down the incoming projectiles. Some were intercepted in bright flares, but at least two torpedoes slipped through, striking near the starship's lower decks. The impact rattled the hull, sending an unsettling shudder through the entire vessel. A flurry of damage reports flooded the command center. Minimal hull breach, controlled depressurization, no catastrophic damage. Yet the message was clear. The Cathune had tested them, and while the Star Striker had retained the upper hand overall, the escape of one of those crafts hinted that the galaxy's powers were no longer content with passive observation. In that single confrontation, the precarious line between demonstration and aggression had been crossed. In the aftermath of the Cathune attack, the Star Striker buzzed with a new level of urgency. Technicians labored to repair the torpedo damage on the lower decks, while security personnel tightened protocols all across the ship. Delegations from other species, spooked by the sudden hostilities, contemplated leaving, though some stayed out of morbid curiosity, keen to see whether human-Seldorian collaboration could withstand real threats. Caliera worked day and night. She coordinated urgent discussions with the other visiting races, offering reassurances that the confrontation had been an isolated incident. Still, the underlying tension was undeniable. Every quarter conversation, every diplomatic exchange bristled with the unspoken realization that the Alliance's hybrid fighting methods were attracting attention from those who saw them as a gateway to game-changing power. The Star Striker might now be viewed less as a diplomatic vessel and more as a singular threat or prize, depending on who was doing the viewing. Rowan Pierce spent his hours debriefing the Lancers and Seldorian soldiers who had been on duty. He convened special sessions in the Security Council chamber, mapping out potential infiltration scenarios. "The Cathune sought intel on our integrated training. That much is certain," he said one morning, addressing a group of officers that included Caliera, Zelleron, Elleris, and Sergeant Halverson. "This was not random. They used our hospitality as cover for espionage." Sergeant Halverson nodded, gaze flicking between the holographic display of the Cathune corvette and the partial trajectory data they managed to capture. "We're dealing with a species that respects brutality and cunning. They might even admire us for retaliating, but that won't stop them from reporting back to whomever they're allied with." Caliera rubbed her temples, exhaustion tugging at her. "We must assume they've gathered partial evidence of our new tactics, especially the infiltration strategies combining Seldorian stealth with human aggression. She glanced at Alaris, who wore a pained expression. This will change the political landscape drastically, potentially forcing other races to see us as a rising power bloc. Pierce exhaled. Let them think that. If it keeps them at bay for a while, it might not be all bad. But we need to be prepared for open confrontation if they decide to form a coalition against us. After the briefing, Caliera and Pierce walked together along a curved hallway that overlooked the ship's main hangar, where row upon row of human and Saldorian fighters were now being retrofitted with shared technologies. She couldn't help feeling conflicted. A part of her found hope in seeing their species united in action, pilots swapping tips, mechanics exchanging designs, a synergy that had once seemed impossible. But the threat of outside aggression loomed, casting a dark cloud over these bright developments. Rowan, sensing her tension, slid an arm around her waist as they paused at a window. "We didn't choose this path lightly," he murmured. "I know your people dreamt of unity through diplomacy, not forced necessity. But sometimes the lines blur. We must protect each other and our new bond if we're to survive." She turned to gaze into his eyes, finding solace in the unwavering determination reflected there. "The galaxy is bigger than either of us once believed," she said. "I only hope our alliance doesn't become a tinderbox for a war larger than anything we can handle." His grip tightened gently. "We'll face that together. One step at a time, like we always have. Besides, you know how stubborn humans can be, and how resourceful Seldorians are," he added with a faint, wry smile. "The rest of the galaxy has no idea what it's up against." Caliera managed a small laugh, a momentary release from the stress. Still, she wondered how many steps remained before this precarious dance of alliances and threats spiraled into a full-blown conflict that even their combined might couldn't contain. Not long after the Cathune incident, a more formal shift in the joint program took shape. Under pressure from human high command and a growing faction within Soldoria's governing council, Pierce and Caliera set in motion the creation of a specialized unit. This unit, dubbed FIST, Force Integration Special Task Force, would serve as a vanguard in case of open hostilities. The idea was to assemble soldiers and tacticians who had truly learned to merge the best of both species' warfighting styles. The corridors of the Star Striker filled with the hum of new recruits, both human and Seldorian. Sergeant Halverson led a crash course in integrated tactics, aided by a Seldorian officer named Mavatriel, who had once lectured on advanced sensor systems at the Valhedra War Academy. Caliera's role, though not a soldier by profession, was critical to the process. She bridged gaps in language, culture, and approach. Where the Lancers struggled to grasp the subtleties of Seldorian discipline, she explained patiently. Where the Seldorians froze in the face of the humans' breakneck improvisation, she reassured them that in the chaos lay potential synergy. Zelleron and Alaris, watching from the sidelines, offered political counsel. They compiled intelligence reports on which alien species might be covertly joining forces, which ones might be seeking a deeper alliance, and who was simply waiting for the dust to settle. Rumors abounded that the Cathune were in talks with other warlike races, perhaps even the Sothari, known for their stealth-based navy. If a coalition formed around the principle of curbing human Seldorian power, it could put them on a collision course with the rest of the galaxy. Amid these concerns, FIST training progressed rapidly. The new recruits were taught to pilot hybrid fighters that could toggle between high-agility thruster modes, inspired by Seldorian engineering, and raw power bursts, derived from human reactor tech. Ground squads practiced infiltration runs that fused Seldorian optical camo with the Crimson Lancer's dynamic breaching tactics. Caliera often observed from overhead balconies, her pulse quickening whenever a maneuver clicked into seamless execution. One particular demonstration drew an audience from both the Star Striker's command staff and a handful of carefully vetted observers, including a Trelaxi ambassador who trilled with excitement whenever a perfect infiltration was pulled off. In the simulation, half a dozen FIST troopers navigated a labyrinth modeled after an abandoned cityscape. By combining their newly learned stealth infiltration with timed ballistic strikes, they managed to secure a simulated hostage in record time, faster even than the standard Crimson Lancer squads had done under purely human tactics. A ripple of awe and mild alarm spread through the watchers. This was tangible proof that the alliance was generating more than political symbolism. It was birthing a new kind of warfare, potent enough to shift any balance of power. As the demonstration concluded, applause and murmured commentary filled the observation deck. Pierce shot Caliera a meaningful glance, a silent acknowledgement of how far they'd come since that fateful day above the burning ruins of Valhedra. She felt her chest tighten with a blend of pride and concern. Yes, we're forging something extraordinary, her gaze seemed to say. But at what price? The question lingered in her mind later that evening when she and Pierce found a moment of quiet in their private quarters. Lying together on a narrow bunk, they spoke in hushed tones about the future of Fist and the looming shadow of interstellar conflict. Pierce gently stroked her hair, as though trying to brush away the weight of her worries. One victory at a time, he whispered, echoing the old human mantra. She listened, heart heavy and hopeful all at once, wishing that those victories might lead to genuine peace rather than a widening arms race. New tensions erupted when intelligence arrived indicating that the Cthulhu had indeed allied with two other aggressive powers, the Volchari and the Margasha, both notorious for expansionist ambitions. The combined threat, if mobilized, could dwarf even humanity's formidable fleets and Soldoria's proud defenses. In a hastily convened war council aboard the Star Striker, Pierce, Halverson, and their Soldorian counterparts weighed the dire news against the progress of the Fist unit. "We need to be ready for an attack on multiple fronts," Pierce said, standing before a large hollow map of contested star lanes. The Cthulhu corvette's infiltration attempt was a red flag. They're likely sharing whatever intel they stole with their new allies. Our guess is they're planning a preemptive strike before Fist can reach full strength. Across the table, Zelleron's features darkened. He tapped a section of the map showing the border worlds between Saldoria and known Cthulhu space. "We can't defend all of our colony planets, not against an onslaught of that magnitude. Our best chance lies in a concentrated defense, perhaps forming a protective ring around critical installations. But even that leaves countless smaller systems vulnerable." Ilaris, arms folded, looked grim but resolute. "We'll have to negotiate with neutral powers to restrict the Cthulhu's hyperlane access. Perhaps the Tralaxi or the Ostari would align with us if we can prove we're not bent on conquest." Caliera listened intently, recalling the uneasy mix of fascination and unease she'd seen in the visiting delegation's eyes. "An important step would be a public demonstration," she proposed. "We can show that our alliance is not about crushing weaker species but about mutual protection. If we convince a critical mass of neutral worlds, they might help isolate the Cthulhu and their allies diplomatically." Pierce nodded. "A demonstration of unity, yes, maybe something more than an internal exercise. A real engagement that proves Fist can operate seamlessly, not just in a controlled scenario." The seed of a plan began to form. Halverson suggested a joint patrol in a sector known for pirate activity, an area typically avoided by most nations. If Fist intervened to protect civilian freighters and outposts, they could showcase their new capabilities in a non-aggressive context. "If we can rescue a few convoys under attack, or suppress a known pirate stronghold, the neutral races might see us as a stabilizing force," she reasoned. Though not without risk, the idea resonated with everyone at the table. By turning their combined warfare into a shield rather than a sword, they might shift the narrative of their alliance in the galaxy's eyes. Caliera volunteered to coordinate the diplomatic aspects, drafting communiques that announced the upcoming patrol as a humanitarian operation, open to observers from any neutral faction. Meanwhile, Pierce and Halverson would ready Fist for his first real mission beyond the Star Striker. Later that evening, as the War Council dispersed, Caliera lingered at the holomap, mind churning with possibilities. Pierce approached, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "This isn't where I thought we'd be a few months ago," he admitted, voice low. "When I first walked through Valhedra's ruins, I never expected to partner with the same people we were overwhelming. But here we are, forging something neither of us anticipated." Caliera turned to face him, her heart heavy yet steeled with purpose. "We're not just forging a new military power, Rowan. We're building a chance for peace that neither of our species ever had before. Maybe if we succeed, it'll inspire others to do the same instead of launching preemptive attacks." He offered a half smile that held both hope and a soldier's realism. We'll find out soon enough. Fist's first mission could set the tone for everything that follows. One battle, one rescue, one victory, whatever it takes to prove the galaxy wrong about us. Or right, Calera whispered, recalling the uneasy sense that some believed humans should be feared. Either way, we can't turn back now. They stood a moment longer, locked in shared resolve, before leaving the council chamber. Ahead lay a mission that would either solidify their alliance as a beacon of protection or ignite the spark of a galactic war. And neither outcome felt entirely within their control. The day of the Fist Patrol arrived with a nervous energy that permeated every deck of the Star Striker. Calera stood on a raised observation platform within the hangar, gazing down at the launch preparations. Engineers hustled to finalize last-minute calibrations on the newly minted hybrid fighters, and soldiers, both human and Saldorian, performed pre-mission checks on their gear. Despite the hum of activity, an undercurrent of anxiety rippled through the assembled crews. This mission would be the first public unveiling of what the two species had achieved together, and if it ended in calamity, the alliance might never recover. From her vantage point, she spotted Commander Rowan Pierce, instantly recognizable in his partial combat armor, conferring with Sergeant Halverson and several other human officers. A short distance away, a Saldorian officer named Mavitril oversaw the final distribution of stealth modules to the infiltration team. Each soldier wore an armband bearing the newly designed fist emblem, a stylized fist half-colored in human deep blue, half in Saldorian emerald. The emblem had quickly become a rallying symbol, representing a fusion of strengths that had once stood in opposition. Calera's thoughts flitted back to the precarious negotiations of the past few weeks. Anxious Tralaxi envoys seeking reassurance, the aloof Ostari playing a careful waiting game, and the brazen Cathun who had already tested the Alliance's defenses. That very morning, a short communique from a distant outpost hinted that the Cathun might have mobilized more corvettes. The possibility of an ambush lingered over the mission like a thundercloud, yet calling it off now would be worse, an admission of weakness that could embolden would-be aggressors. A resounding klaxon echoed through the hangar, signaling the start of the launch cycle. Calera quickly descended the metal staircase to join Pierce and Halverson near the line of waiting craft. Up close, the hybrid fighters were an impressive sight. Sleek frames combining Saldorian aerodynamic curves with Terran thruster arrays, each craft capable of shifting from stealth-based infiltration to raw thrust in seconds. The design symbolized everything the Alliance hoped to prove, a synergy of grace and power that might turn skepticism into awe. Pierce offered Calera a tense nod. We'll deploy 2 wings of fighters and a corvette for support. Our infiltration team, led by Mavitril, will sweep any pirate bases in the region. The rest of us will protect nearby trade routes. He paused, scanning her expression. I assume you'll coordinate the diplomatic broadcast? She managed a resolute smile. Yes, I'll be on the Indomitable Heart, the small Saldorian command vessel accompanying the mission, handling communications for any distress calls or observation requests. We're sending the feed to several neutral star nations so they can witness how we handle this operation. Sergeant Halverson clapped a gauntleted hand on Pierce's shoulder. We're as ready as we'll ever be, Commander. Let's give the galaxy a show they won't soon forget. Around them, pilots strapped into cockpits, while deck crews cleared the launch platforms. The tension felt as palpable as a drawn bowstring. This was more than a routine patrol or an anti-pirate operation. It was a test of whether human Saldorian unity could stand against the prejudices and hostilities brewing outside their respective star systems. With a low rumble, the first wave of fighters lifted off, disappearing through the atmosphere shields into the starlit vacuum beyond. The second wave followed suit, a graceful arc of thrusters blazing as they departed the hangar. Standing there in the receding roar, Calera glimpsed a future in which the outcome of this mission, for better or worse, might redefine galactic politics and her own life in ways she could hardly fathom. Hours later, Calera sat in the bustling command center of the Indomitable Heart, watching flickers of data scroll across multiple holo displays. Through a reinforced viewport, she observed the swirl of distant stars. Her comlink crackled intermittently with updates. Patrol squads exchanging coded acknowledgments and the infiltration team reporting back on sensor readings. So far, the operation had proceeded without incident, but she sensed an anticipatory hush among the crew. Pirates in this sector were known for ambush tactics, and the Cathoon's possible involvement added a layer of dread. Then it happened. A half-panicked hail from a civilian transport identified as the Stellar Key, traveling on a route that often fell prey to raiders. Caliera's translator earpiece rendered the pilot's urgent pleas in crisp Seldorian. "We are under attack. Unidentified vessels, multiple hostiles, require immediate assistance." Her pulse quickened. This was their opportunity to prove themselves as protectors rather than aggressors. She relayed the coordinates to Pierce, whose voice came through with steely calm. "Fist Wing 2, move to intercept. Wing 1, maintain cover for infiltration ops. We'll handle the situation." Moments later, Caliera could see the readout of the Wing 2's approach, led by Lieutenant Rena Maddox, the same infiltration specialist who had once accidentally shot a Saldorian scout during training. Now Maddox commanded a diverse squad of humans and Saldorians, each pilot controlling a hybrid fighter. As they closed in, the sensors aboard the indomitable Heart detected at least a dozen small ships circling the Stellar Key like predators. Their energy signatures bore the hallmarks of loosely organized pirate gangs, yet there was something off about their maneuvers. Too disciplined, too coordinated. Could these be mercenaries armed or guided by the Cathoon? The question hung unspoken on every officer's lips. Caliera's screen displayed the confrontation in miniature. Wing 2 accelerating toward the besieged transport, luminous streaks of engine flares crossing the darkness. The pirates broke formation, unleashing sporadic laser fire in low-yield missiles. But they hadn't anticipated the synergy of fist tactics. Seldorian pilots executed tight spirals that baffled conventional targeting locks, while human flyers exploited the momentary disarray, hammering the raiders with pinpoint railgun bursts. Within seconds, the tide turned. 2 pirate vessels erupted in brilliant explosions, and several more tried to break away. Fist pursued relentlessly, orchestrating a net of sensor jammers and stealth modules that corralled the hostiles. In the command center, Caliera released a slow breath. This was precisely the demonstration they had hoped for, a swift, decisive intervention that saved civilian lives. Yet no victory was assured until the last attacker was routed or captured. The screens revealed a cluster of pirate craft scattering, only to be systematically disabled by well-coordinated crossfire. Over open channels, Caliera could hear the astonished gratitude of the Stellar Key's captain as the pirates' hold dissipated. Amid the relief, a new blip materialized on the sensors, a larger vessel, possibly a pirate command ship, emerging from behind a barren moon. The watchers in the indomitable Heart fell silent. Caliera swallowed hard, reading the data. The incoming craft boasted heavier armaments than typical raider scouts. If these criminals had indeed allied with the Cathoon, this might be the real test, a clash with well-equipped adversaries who had studied human Seldorian tactics. Pierce's voice crackled again. "Wing 2, regroup and prepare for incoming hostiles. Support craft, move in for prisoner retrieval from the disabled pirate ships. Ambassador Caliera, stand by for direct negotiations if they attempt to contact us." With every word, the tension ratcheted up another notch. The indomitable Heart's comm officers exchanged worried glances. All eyes were on the holo display as the shadowy outline of the command ship drew closer, its weapon systems spiking in energy. The demonstration had only just begun, and it seemed the galaxy, or at least its underbelly, was determined to see how far Fist could be pushed. Caliera had barely settled from the spike of adrenaline when a direct transmission request flashed across the comm console. The channel ID matched the approaching command ship, its name reading in an unknown dialect that the translator tentatively rendered as Razor-Scale Dreadnought. With a nod from her Saldorian comm officer, Caliera accepted the call. The display flickered to reveal a dimly lit bridge crowded with reptilian silhouettes, likely a mix of pirate crew and, she suspected, Cathoon representatives. "This is Herath Nazeth, commander of the Razor-Scale Dreadnought," hissed a voice in heavily accented common. "You have interfered with our rightful spoils and destroyed our smaller craft. Surrender compensation and withdraw, or we will unleash our full firepower." The speaker's scaled features contorted into a sneer that revealed rows of sharpened teeth, confirming Caliera's suspicion that at least some aboard were Cthulhu or a related reptilian species. She forced her breathing to remain steady. I am Ambassador Caliera Salandras, representing the Human Saldorian Alliance. Your activities in this sector constitute piracy and endanger innocent life. We will not stand down. She paused, choosing her words carefully to project confidence. However, we are willing to negotiate the peaceful release of any captives or stolen goods in exchange for leniency. Otherwise, our forces will respond in kind. A guttural chuckle emerged from her wrath, soon echoed by scaly voices off-screen. Bravado, he hissed. Your new alliance thinks it can rewrite the rules of the galaxy. We have heard of your so-called fist, your hybrid tactics, but you are not the only ones who can adapt. The transmission cut abruptly, replaced by the beep of disengagement. Caliera's heart lurched in her chest. She turned to her officers. That was no ordinary pirate, she murmured, feeling the chill of realization. They've been briefed on our capabilities, maybe by the Cthulhu or another faction. They're testing our resolve. Outside the ship, the confrontation escalated. The razor-scale dreadnought advanced at a slow, menacing pace, launching a swarm of guided torpedoes. On the holo displays, Caliera watched in tense silence as Wing 2 scrambled to intercept. Their combined training paid off. Saldorian stealth modules allowed them to evade early target locks, while the human pilots used decoys and rapid maneuvers to draw away entire clusters of torpedoes. One by one, the incoming warheads were picked off by short-range defensive lasers. Yet the razor-scale dreadnought was not deterred. It continued its approach, bringing massive broadside cannons to bear. With a thunderous volley that lit up the holofeed in violent flashes, it tested Fist's outer perimeter. Caliera's comlink erupted with staccato calls, requests for reinforcements, damage reports, and status checks from the infiltration team. She pressed the earpiece firmly, trying to maintain clarity in the chaos. Commander Pierce came through with grim determination. Ambassador, we need backup from the Star Striker. This ship is outfitted with heavier armor than we anticipated. Our fighters can harass, but we may not be able to deliver a disabling blow without capital-grade weapons. In the background, Caliera heard the piercing wail of missile alerts and felt her stomach twist at the danger they now faced. She nodded sharply, turning to the nearest officer. Send an urgent request for immediate support, code Priority Alpha, and get the infiltration team's location. Maybe there's a way to use stealth boarding to disrupt the dreadnought from the inside. The officer saluted, relaying the message. Amid the frantic swirl of data, Caliera could only pray that the Star Striker would arrive in time, or that Fist could hold out until then. This was no mere test, but a full-blown trial by fire, and the outcome would ripple through countless star systems, deciding whether the newly forged alliance stood or fell. Outside the viewport of the indomitable heart, the battle against the razor-scale dreadnought became a spectacle of fire and motion. Streams of tracer rounds and energy beams sliced through the darkness, painting the void with fleeting, brutal artistry. Caliera found herself torn between her diplomatic instincts, trying to find any last shred of negotiation, and her more primal fear that negotiations had already failed. Within minutes, the infiltration team responded to her request. Officer Mavitral signaled that he and a mix of human Saldorian commandos were prepared to attempt a boarding action. Using specialized assault shuttles fitted with Saldorian stealth plating, they could slip in close, latch onto the dreadnought's outer hull, and carve a breach before being detected. It was a bold plan, but it might be their best chance to cripple the pirate vessel from within. Commander Pierce's voice crackled over the channel. I'll coordinate from the fighter screen. Halverson will handle the infiltration deployment. Ambassador, maintain our link to the outside. If the Star Striker can't mobilize soon, we'll need a fallback plan to evacuate the civilians in the sector. The line went silent, leaving Caliera to focus on her station, heart pounding. Sergeant Halverson swiftly led the boarding shuttles from the hangar of the Indomitable Heart. Masked by intermittent sensor jamming, the craft slipped behind a barrage launched by Fist's fighters, concealing their departure. On Caliera's display, she followed the minuscule dots representing the infiltration team as they weaved through chaotic crossfire. A well-timed decoy missile from the Saldorian pilot Arashai gave them just enough of a window to reach the razor-scale dreadnought's flank. No sooner had they attached to the hull than the dreadnought pivoted violently, as though sensing an intrusion. Metal screeched over the comm feed. Halverson's voice came through, laced with tension. "Breach successful. We're inside, but the hostiles know we're here. Engaging internal defenses. Mavitrol, watch your six. These corridors are rigged with automated turrets." From Caliera's vantage, she could only imagine the labyrinth within the dreadnought, filled with smoke, flickering lights, and reptilian adversaries determined to repel boarders. Each new burst of static or rushed update over the infiltration channel made her breath catch. She recognized the voices of both humans and Saldorians, calling out positions, marking targets, and reassuring each other with that extraordinary blend of trust she had helped foster through the alliance. Meanwhile, outside, the fist fighters fought desperately to keep the dreadnought off balance, preventing it from focusing its formidable batteries on the infiltration shuttles still clamped to its hull. Under Rowan Pierce's direction, they executed feints and pincer maneuvers, leveraging Saldorian grace for evasion and human aggression for sudden, decisive strikes. Yet the dreadnought refused to be cowed, raking the starfield with wild shots that threatened to blast the smaller ships into debris. Nearly half an hour dragged by, an eternity in the swirl of deep space combat. Caliera found herself gripping the edge of her console, every new alert tightening the knot in her chest. Then, at last, a whoop of excitement erupted over comms. Mavitrol's triumphant shout. "We've reached primary reactor controls. Sabotaging them now. Prepare for emergency thrust if you're too close." Suddenly, the razor-scale dreadnought's power readings spiked wildly, then plummeted. The large vessel veered off course, as if its propulsion systems had lost synchronization. A series of small internal explosions peppered its flanks, visible even from the indomitable heart. Caliera's eyes widened in relief. If the infiltration team had succeeded in disabling the main reactor, the dreadnought was nearly finished. All that remained was ensuring Fisk could withdraw before the massive ship took them with it in a catastrophic meltdown. With the razor-scale dreadnought gutted from within and spinning in an uncontrolled arc, the pirates aboard began broadcasting panicked signals of surrender. Some jettisoned escape pods. Others, it seemed, locked themselves in sealed compartments to wait out the meltdown. Fist, still in formation, seized the moment to corral any potential hostiles. Caliera oversaw transmissions from half a dozen lifeboats requesting mercy, their reptilian occupants suddenly far less boastful than their leader had been. Commander Pierce's voice chimed over the Alliance channel. "All units, pull back to a safe perimeter. Sergeant Halverson, get your team out of there. Set the meltdown on a timed delay if you can. We don't need any more casualties." Static crackled as Halverson and Mavitrol confirmed they were sealing off the reactor chamber and making a beeline to the boarding shuttles. Minutes ticked by like hours. On the holo display, the dreadnought continued to degrade. Shimmering arcs of electricity signaled failing containment fields, and large rents in the hull vented streams of debris. Several smaller pirate vessels, previously disabled, now tried to flee, only to be cut off or destroyed by fist fighter squads. The once dubious Saldorian technology, combined with the infamous human knack for improvisation, had come together with lethal efficiency. Finally, Halverson reported, "We're clear. I repeat, infiltration team is clear of the target." Their boarding shuttles disengaged from the battered hull, carefully maneuvering through floating wreckage. Caliera felt an immense weight lift from her chest. In front of her, Starlane data indicated the arrival of reinforcements from the Star Striker, which had dispatched a destroyer and additional fighter wings after receiving the emergency call. That backup might now be more of a precaution than a necessity. A subdued quiet settled over the command center as the meltdown sequence progressed. Caliera stood by the main viewport, watching the final shutters of the razor-scale dreadnought. In a silent, blinding flash, the ship's reactor finally ruptured. Even with tinted, protective screens, the glare made her wince. When the light receded, all that remained were drifting chunks of armor, the remnants of a once formidable threat. The comms erupted with cheers and ragged laughter. It was a moment of victory, but a sobering one too. The aftermath would involve dealing with prisoners, salvaging any advanced weaponry or datum that might hint at deeper alliances with the Cathun. Caliera wondered how many more such battles they would face in the looming crisis that threatened to engulf the galaxy. A beep on her console announced an incoming hail from the civilian transport Stellar Key, whose captain effusively thanked Fist for their intervention. "We owe you our lives," the exhausted voice confessed. "We heard rumors that humans and Saldorians had formed some kind of miracle team. I didn't believe it, until today." Calera closed her eyes for a moment, relief mixing with the pang of responsibility. This was precisely the message she wanted the galaxy to receive, that the new alliance was not about conquest or subjugation, but protection. Nonetheless, the victory here would inevitably ripple outward. Other star nations watching the feed might view Fist's efficiency as either a beacon of hope or a dire warning. In that sense, the success against the Razor-scale dreadnought was merely one step in a much larger dance, one that might soon sweep across entire star clusters. News of the Fist Patrol's triumph spread at light speed across interstellar communication relays. Within days, the rescue of the Stellar Key and the destruction of the Razor-scale dreadnought were hailed by some as evidence that humans and Soldorians could lead a new era of cooperative security. Diplomatic requests began to pour into the Star Striker from smaller or more vulnerable civilizations. The Trilaxi offered to share advanced scanning technologies. The Astari expressed cautious interest in forging a mutual defense pact, and even a few historically isolated races reached out to test the waters of diplomacy. But not all responses were benign. Reports indicated that the Cthulhu, enraged by the public demonstration of Fist's effectiveness, were rallying more allies to their cause. Whispers of an impending coalition of powerful militaristic species, some with centuries-old grievances against humanity or Saldoria, loomed like thunderheads on the horizon. In hushed war councils, Commander Pierce, Caliera, and the rest of the Alliance leadership weighed scenarios where they might soon face a multi-front assault. Would Fist be enough to safeguard their fledgling union? In an effort to consolidate the momentum from their victory, Caliera organized a grand summit aboard the Star Striker. Invitations went out to over 30 starfaring races, promising a discussion on mutual cooperation, economic exchange, and coordinated defense against piracy or expansionist aggression. Confronted by fresh evidence of Fist's prowess, many powers agreed to attend. The hangar bays that had once borne only Saldorian and human vessels soon filled with exotic ships of all shapes and configurations, some sleek and organic, others blocky and bristling with armaments. For Caliera, the summit was a whirlwind of preparation. She penned draft accords, orchestrated seating arrangements to avoid old feuds flaring up at the negotiation tables, and labored over every detail from gastronomic preferences to translation algorithms. Pierce, meanwhile, oversaw security drills, ensuring that no visiting delegation could replicate the Cthulhu's espionage efforts. Together they formed a dual spearhead, one aimed at diplomatic unification, the other at preserving the alliance by force if necessary. On the first day of the summit, the Star Striker's largest conference hall teemed with representatives. The Trilaxi perched on raised stools designed for their bird-like limbs. The Ostari, tall and robed in shimmering fabrics, spoke in voices that thrummed with subtle vibrations. Even the reptilian Tessaran, a distant offshoot of the Cthulhu, attended in cautious curiosity. In her opening address, Caliera stood at a dais flanked by the human Earth emblem and the Saldorian star sigil, her voice reverberating through a translator system that broadcast in dozens of tongues. "Esteemed delegates," she began, golden eyes traversing the assembled throng, "we gather at a crossroads in our galaxy's history. Recent events have shown us that when species pool their strengths rather than pit them against one another, we can confront threats once deemed insurmountable. My people, the Saldorians, have come to understand the resilience and courage of humanity. Likewise, the humans have found value in Saldorian discipline and diplomacy. The union we have forged is not an anomaly. It is a precursor to what we can achieve together." A subdued murmur swept the hall, some delegates nodding or gently fanning their wings, others fixing her with skeptical glares. Caliera continued, "We offer a blueprint for cooperation, starting with shared security measures against piracy and expansionist violence. Let this summit be the dawn of a new era, an era in which no race stands alone, and no star system lives in fear of marauders or despots. She stepped back, heart pounding, as the crowd erupted in various reactions. Some enthusiastic applause, some hesitant murmuring, and a few outright scoffs. The outcome remained uncertain, but a door had been opened. If the summit succeeded, it could reshape entire star lanes into corridors of mutual defense and trade. If it failed, the swirling threat of the Cthulhu coalition might overwhelm them all before they even had a chance to try him. Caliera, stealing a glance at Pierce, could see the faint trace of a determined smile on his scarred face. They were gambling everything on unity, but with each passing day, that unity seemed to gather strength. By the summit's end, an extraordinary new institution began to take shape. The Celestial Accord, a coalition bound by shared defense treaties and open trade routes, with humans and Saldorians at its core. Not every attendee signed on. Some remained wary or outright hostile, but enough pledged their support to give the Accord a tangible foundation. Over the following months, joint patrols like the Fist mission multiplied, each manned by crews comprising multiple species. Entire star systems that had once stood isolated found themselves linked through fresh alliances, exchanging resources and expertise. From the vantage point of a few years, Caliera sometimes marveled at the transformation. Where once she had nervously observed a single human soldier scything through the ruins of Valhedra, she now witnessed entire fleets, drawn from half a dozen races, drilling side by side in a spirit of collaboration. The impetus for it all had been the improbable bond she forged with Commander Rowan Pierce. Their marriage, initially a desperate political gambit, grew into a genuine partnership built on mutual respect, tempered by countless trials on and off the battlefield. Inevitably, the Cthulhu-led coalition did strike, but it came too late. By then, the Celestial Accord had formed a robust network of integrated militaries, and they met the invaders with such coordinated ferocity that the threat evaporated. Smaller skirmishes persisted, but the dream of subjugating or dismantling the alliance proved unattainable. Each new clash only reinforced the synergy that had begun with humans and Saldorians, a synergy that baffled older warrior cultures accustomed to single-species dominion. In recognition of their roles, Caliera and Pierce were dubbed the first architects of the Accord, a title meant to honor the union between two once warring civilizations. The pair traveled across the galaxy, officiating signatory ceremonies and intervening in local disputes that threatened to derail the blossoming era of cooperation. Whether they were mediating a standoff in the Silurus Nebula or leading a relief convoy through a war-torn cluster, the presence of the first architects symbolized a new paradigm. 5 years after the initial Fist Patrol, the Celestial Accord celebrated its anniversary at Unity Station, an enormous orbital platform constructed jointly by multiple species. Pierce and Caliera stood on a grand dais, speaking to an assembly of delegates far larger and more diverse than the initial summit aboard the Star Striker. Here, under an array of lights that highlighted the unified insignias of numerous species, Caliera recalled the very moment she had once whispered in horror, "We can't win. Humans are gods of war." She let her gaze drift across the crowd. Humans, Saldorians, Trilaxi, Ostari, and even a scattering of reptilian species who had broken away from the Cthulhu coalition. Together they had redefined the word victory. It was no longer solely about crushing an adversary, but about protecting each other, forging bonds deeper than treaties on paper. She and Pierce had learned that the primal ferocity humans wielded in combat could be harnessed for compassion, just as the Saldorians' measured approach to diplomacy could pave the way for bold leaps of faith. As her speech ended, and the vast crowd erupted in applause, Caliera felt Pierce take her hand. They had journeyed an impossible distance from that day in a ruined capital, from that nightmarish instant when humankind's unstoppable nature seemed poised to extinguish her own race. Yet, in stepping across the gulf between them, they had ignited something more potent than war, a living testament that, when woven together, differences could become the very fabric of hope. Looking back on this journey, it's clear that what began in destruction ended in hope. From the smoking ruins of a proud alien capital to the birth of a galactic coalition, these events remind us how fear can evolve into trust and how cooperation can conquer even the deepest divides. When humans and Saldorians learned to combine unwavering courage with methodical grace, They didn't just change their own destinies, they opened the door to unity across countless star systems. As someone who's witnessed both the terror of unchecked power and the beauty of shared purpose, I personally believe this story reflects our own capacity for growth and redemption. I hope you found the journey as inspiring as I did. Feel free to comment below with your reactions, theories, and favorite moments. Let's keep the conversation going. And once again, thank you for supporting our channel by subscribing and spreading the word. Safe travels, everyone.